Ladies and gentlemen, we're back. We're back at maybe a more regular timeline. I don't know. We're going to give this evening session a go. You obviously had the practice report earlier this afternoon with Cookie and Ian. We're going to talk about practice. Obviously, this is the Allen Iverson part of the season where we just talk about practice all the time, incessantly, and we're going to get a little bit of insight into what was going on in those closed practices, or at least what happened behind closed doors with our sources. But let's start with you, Ian. You mentioned earlier today, and Paul was mentioning this, that when you got to practice, this is the first practice you've been to live. Is that correct?
As a media member, yeah.
As a media member, and you were pretty close. So I think Paul was saying the key takeaways there are that these people are very big and they're very fast, and it's not really easy to know what's happening all the time. Is that a fair assessment of your takeaways today?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's like 100 people on the field. They move very, very quickly, which I think has already been reported on, that Sark runs a very efficient practice. When they went into the 11-on-11, like sort of run game scrimmage portion, it was amazing how quickly they were getting lined up and running plays up and down the field. I don't know if that's how they've always done it. It would seem like that would prepare them really well for moments like the end of half drives by Oklahoma that cost Texas the Red River shootout. So it was good to see that. If I had gotten more video, I would have more to offer, but I did take some video and was able to rewind a couple of things and see it a little more that I wrote up for the website.
Apparently, we need to send Jordan Hicks and Case McCoy with their video equipment over there so we can have a more accurate assessment of practice.
Wow. We're really going there. Okay. All right. Just swinging for the fences straight out of the gates there, Eric. That is a valid question, though. Ian, do you know how the camera app works? Was that part of it? It took you a little while to get to it, or is that why it was hard to get all the recordings in?
You know what, Elsie? I was invited here.
Sorry.
I don't appreciate this line of questions. And
now he's not going to take this disrespect.
It's totally fair. It's totally fair. I definitely appreciate that.
Those practices are tough. You've got to go in there with a plan, and I think they were caught off guard by them going 11-on-11, which it sounds like they were doing team run, where it's all either running the ball or play action. Yeah, and it does move fast. They use more tempo in practice than they do in games, probably to prepare them for the season.
It is. I know we're having a little bit of a go at you here, Ian, but at the same time, and this is a legitimate question, having experienced this now, how will you mentally prepare going to the next one? Is there something that's going to change for you in how you approach observing and reporting practice as now a media member?
I would just take a lot more video. I wasn't sure about what the parameters were, although I don't think they were really paying that much attention to what I was doing, so I probably could have just done whatever I wanted. It's what I would have put online later that would have gotten me into trouble or not. So yeah, I mean, if I get another chance this fall, or if I have to wait till spring or something, I'm just going to take a ton of video, and then we'll see what happens.
Eric, what's the news rather for those closed practices? I don't want to necessarily call them closed practices, but that's basically what they are. What are we hearing from our sources inside the program?
This line of question reminds me of Ian and the old Sports Center commercial when they had the young prodigy announcer, and he just flames out. We brought him up too early. Jimmy Key, I could hit him. What's he, 30? But yeah, so the closed practices, and they are closed. What are we hearing from them? Defense have been winning these, pretty much. In varying fashion, sometimes close, sometimes convincingly. Saturday's practice was a pretty convincing defensive win, but that's not surprising. It usually happens with the defense is ahead of the offense during these big practice blocks, and they'll tend to even out over time. Sark will get more into the playbook and cause a little more confusion for the secondary and slow down the pass rush. But the pass rush, we're hearing everything we wanted to hear about them coming in. Obviously, it seemed like they upgraded the personnel. Bringing in Trey Moore was huge. Another year for Barron Sorrell, Ethan Burke, Colin Simmons, Colton Vossick coming back. So that appears to be a legitimate team strength at this point. But again, that can play into Sark is not going to be slowing them down. He's not going to be chipping them in ways that they will going on, later in the fall camp. Wide receivers are definitely a team strength. They're living up to the hype. They're not getting deep for touchdowns all that often, but they are making their share of plays, making some guys miss in space. We hear about a different wide receiver every practice. Ryan Wingo and Silas Bolden were good on Saturday night during the private portion. I've not heard yet who was good today in today's private portion, but that's something I'll have up later on Inside Texas. Jaden Blue had a couple of good runs. I know CJ Baxter was with the ones today. It sounds like he's been with the ones, but it doesn't take long for Jaden Blue to impress and make the most of his carries.
Who was, and this is a question. We talk about depth chart a lot at this phase because again, it's something that we can talk about. Obviously, the real depth chart, as Joe pointed out earlier, is behind closed doors, but we get a good idea about what's happening by way of rep schedule. So the question here is, what is the news of it sounds like the news of the day from IT is that is the question of who was running the ones for the DB. So who did you see? Who do we know out there that was running with the ones today?
Well, I wouldn't make too much of it because they had Barron and Makuba running with the twos in that scrimmage, and I don't think Makuba and Barron are going to be on the bench.
Right.
So I think it was more of a, and they had Black and Roberson as the two cornerbacks. I don't know if those guys are number two on the depth chart normally. I think they were just trying to give different guys looks together in different settings so that just for general preparedness. I don't think what we saw was a change in the pecking order.
And at this phase, Paul, I would imagine that especially we've talked a lot about obviously two positions of concern, and I use that term loosely, but which has been the DBs and the defensive tackles. I would imagine at this phase, it's pretty smart. We want to rotate those guys as much as possible. So that depth chart, as Ian pointed out, may not be as indicative as we might hope it would be moving toward the season.
Yeah, and I love the pairings. I mean, what I've been reading, it sounds like they may be assigning a minder to the freaks. So it's like a freak and a geek pairing. You've got Michael Taff with Jelani McDonald or Williams, or you have Makuba out there paired with one of those guys, right? Now, there'll be times when Makuba and Taff will play together, but it always makes sense to have sort of a brain out there along with the big guy who moves real fast and hits real hard. So I love it. And I mean, look, Jelani McDonald's a freak. He needs to play. And so I don't think the issues with the defensive backs last year were rotations. I've read that, or people have opined that, oh, we tried to play everyone, they got confused. That's really not what happened. If you have guys that know the scheme and know what they're supposed to do, and they've got good leadership around them, which Taff or Makuba or both will provide, then you're always going to be in good shape. And then I think the really exciting thing for me, I go hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park and disconnect, and I come back and I find out we got Gilbo Baggins at nickel, and we've got Jahdae Barron out there at field corner. That's really exciting. So to be able to go three across like that, potentially play man under, and then have two true safeties, and one of them could be in cover one or cover two, depending on your poison. But that really allows the what I'll call the freak and the geek pairing, the brain safety and the big physical safety. I just think that's going to be really interesting, and we'll see how it plays out. I mean, they haven't even gone full pads yet, but to think that Gilbo's shown enough that they would even be messing around with it, that's really, really encouraging.
Well, I think, and again, we encourage you to send in your questions. If you've got a super chat, please send that in. But the chat is blowing up. And again, and look, sometimes we get experienced people, sometimes inexperienced people. I think this person, I don't know, probably doesn't know what they're talking about, but can you explain the importance of depth a little bit? I know sounds like an obvious thing, but when we're moving into this secondary with depth, we've got new players, we've got transfers, we've got relatively young players. So for you, Ian, how does this equate to the way that PK likes to run his secondary? I mean, is he the type of guy that's going to rotate in a lot, or is this someone that kind of sticks with his horses? And thank you for that question, Andrew Kelson.
I think PK would be an insurance salesman if he wasn't a football coach. He's always trying to find the angle to avoid disaster. They just, you'll like that one.
No, this is great. I love Ian open mic night. This is really fantastic.
They've rotated since he got here. I think it's just something he believes in. You end up in situations otherwise. Well, even with that, they ended up in a situation in Stillwater a couple of years ago where they had to trot out combinations of defensive backs that may have never had to play together before because they were so beat up. You get into a spot like that, and if you're not ready, you can lose, any game on the schedule. Becomes a possible loss if your secondary can't play together. So they can afford to buy up all the kinds of insurance, and so they do.
One of the questions that gets asked a lot around this time is the idea of cohesion. It's really early, I think, obviously, to bring some of that up, but it's been one of the themes, certainly on Inside Texas, is what kind of cohesion are we going to get with the front and the back of that defense? It sounds like the defense is doing well right now, but have you heard anything specific about that, Eric, moving forward? Have you started to see that, or again, is this just early days?
Well, I think it's early, but we are hearing of that, just better team defense, team run fits, fewer busts in the secondary for sure, more assignment sound up front than they were last year, because obviously how good they were last year, but definitely improved over the spring. So I would say yes, but I'm also excited to hear about how the scrimmage goes this Saturday to get a much better idea. I'm sure they're going to run about 80 plays. They'll be rotating in quite a bit. We'll get a much better idea based on our Saturday intel.
We've got our super chat now, and this is a topic that we don't talk about nearly enough. So I want to thank UT Boy for bringing this up. But is there any news on Jonte, how he might be doing? We haven't had a Jonte update in a little while. I'll let you want to take this one, Ian, now that you're a member of the media.
I mean, he addressed me. I'll take it. And we had one. It's probably been a week since we had one, but yeah, Jonte's had a good offseason. Expect him to play quite a bit this year. First team reps, I'm not sure. Rotating with those guys. Maybe it's a 60-40 split, 70-30. I'm not sure. He's going to play a lot. He's still got a chance to start. I'm just not quite sure he's going to start. I do expect him to play a lot. I expect him to be an absolute star in 2025 at the latest. But this season is still up in the air. I'm sure UT Boy is going to have conflicting information on that. We'll see. I'm curious what he has to say.
And just going back to the secondary really quickly, I want to frame this a little bit differently because it is a little bit vague, but for the breakout players in the secondary, is there one player in particular that you would like to see break out? Just from a personal, like you've been following the player, you'd really like to see them have a breakout year. I know I'm just kind of throwing that on you really quickly here, but is there anybody that immediately comes to mind for you, Paul?
Well, breakout suggests a surprise. And if you're an Inside Texas reader, there are no surprises. Right. I think Manny Muhammad. I think so if you probably had to say, is there a guy that isn't on a preseason all SEC team, right, from the media, who could be on it at the end of the year? I think that's a likely candidate. And if Texas wants to achieve its ambitions, you need a shutdown guy at certainly one of the corner spots, if not both.
Ian, you retracted your chin pretty heavily there at the thought of that. Is there something that you would like to say?
I was going to say Derek Williams. Manny Muhammad is, I think, the right answer. But after Muhammad, every time you see Williams do things on the football field, I think he has the most range I've seen on campus since Earl Thomas. Just the way he flies across the field and gets to plays that other guys would never get to. They have a lot of guys that are good ahead of him. I don't think they're going to be bad at safety if he doesn't break out. But if he did break out, that'd be great.
Anybody that you can think of, Ian? Eric?
Derek is a good one in that, the casual fan can watch him on Saturday and go, whoa, who the hell is that guy screeching across the field or making a play on a ball, uses all of his length. He's a good player. I mean, if you went by expectations, I think I expect Manny Muhammad to be really good. I expect Derek Williams to be really good. If you went by who could exceed expectations, I might go with Gilbo or even Gavin Holmes this year. Gavin just moves incredibly effortlessly for a corner as far as mirroring receivers. He probably moves even better than Malik Muhammad. It's just a natural mover. And I'm not saying he's got The technique that Malik has, I don't know that he has the schematic versatility that Malik has, but just as far as 1v1 versus the receiver, I don't know that he's got a match within the program. But I'm also curious to see what Gilbo has, man. He's probably got as much praise of any defensive back on the entire team going back to January. So that's that, and we're seeing that back up on the field. All that information is being corroborated by what we're seeing on the field with our own eyes. So I'm curious to see that. He's got a really good build. It's just, can he process the box as well as Barron, and that allows them to move Barron outside. Then I think they're headed for a special season in the secondary. But yeah, he was on a really good trajectory when he first got to Texas. Had a couple off-field mishaps. I think he lost some motivation, realizing that playing time was going to be tough to come by this year. He's been locked in since January. There were concerns he might leave in December. Whatever they told him to get him to come back, and I think it coincided with moving Jahdae Barron outside more, which they're also doing. I think that really rejuvenated him, and he seems really locked in. So as far as breakout versus expectations, I think those two guys, but breaking out on a national scale, it would be Muhammad one and then Williams second.
One of the things that IT is able to offer, I think, first and foremost above, let's face it, anyone in the country, is a level of expertise, a level of specificity when it comes to different subjects. And we have a resident expert when it comes to the Heisman. And I want to talk to you, Paul, about, do you think Quinn has the supporting cast and processing to win the Heisman? You are a historian. This is something that you've been following for a very long time. I know that you probably can't see it back there behind the Calvin and Hobbes books, but I do know you have a miniature Heisman that you like to polish every morning. That's not a euphemism. So if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about Quinn, his supporting cast, and does he have the processing to win the Heisman?
I call it my Woodson.
Oh, of course. Forgive me.
Calvin Hobbes is a little too intellectual for me. I like Family Circus.
Fair enough. It's also probably
because we'll have the little diagram of the route that he took with the dotted lines to find his peanut butter jelly sandwich. Like, I find that really delightful. Sometimes I'll call Eric and we'll just laugh and laugh. I'll read him Family Circus cartoons just all night, and he'll just say, one more before I go to bed. And I'm like, come on, man, you got to go to bed.
He is insatiable.
He is just a rascal. You guys know I love the Heisman. That's my weak spot. I love that award. It's so pure and so properly awarded every year. Yes, he does have the potential, and he does have the supporting cast. And if he levels up at the same level that he did from last year, from the year previous to this year, he will be in New York, and he will have a very good shot at the Heisman. I think there's an absolute chance. Look, the truth is, the Heisman, a lot of it is about narrative. It's about hype. It's about your team success. It helps that he's a quarterback. It's an award for quarterbacks. For every Devontae Smith, there's 20 quarterbacks that you can name, right? It's also about being typically, Lamar Jackson types accepted. You got to be a top 10 team, probably a top 5 team. And then you got to have a little narrative around you, right? That the media latches onto, and the Heisman moment and all that nonsense, right? So Quinn is capable of all of that stuff. And, Texas is a team that evokes strong feelings, positive and negative. And that's useful for Heisman narratives as well as if you listen to other like college football podcasts or just random opinion makers, they'll have these sort of off-season lists of what game, if you could go to any game, what game would you go to this year? I swear to God, 80% of the answers from media members all over the country, it's Texas, Michigan, Texas A&M, Texas OU, Texas, Georgia. Like, Texas is the team that gets mentioned in every single one of these games. So he's going to have some really big stages. I mean, if he lights up the Georgia Bulldogs in Austin, you can cruise for 4 games after that on media plaudits, and you'll be just fine for the Heisman. So
and you may not know the answer to this, Eric, has the campaigning, I don't want to use the word campaigning, but we do. I mean, University of Texas does have a marketing department. Has that already started? I mean, we're starting to see Quinn out there a lot, certainly for some NIL stuff. He's got
I'm seeing him NIL. He's got a Hulu commercial coming out.
Yep.
I haven't really seen any school material on him, but I'm sure that's in the works. They don't lack for budget. They don't lack for wanting the advertisement. Anytime they can put John Bianco's really good. He's got a very long and distinguished list of media members that are receptive to information regarding Texas. So I think we'll probably see that pick up steam here, later in the months. But again, he's not going to. I think what Paul was saying. I think 4 of the 7 highest or most expensive tickets for a game this season are the 4 games that Paul just mentioned. There's 4 of the top 7. So there's going to be so much advertising just by Texas's schedule this year, first year in the SEC. I mean, it's a media PR team's dream scenario for Texas. But I do think they will ramp up their own individual campaign later in the month.
Hey, LC, can I bring up some Longhorn achievements in the bigger picture?
Oh, yes. There's a big one that recently happened.
Well, there's a couple. So Steve McMichael, the great defensive tackle, Mongo, great pro wrestler as well as an amazing Chicago Bear player in the NFL. Yep. He was selected for the NFL Hall of Fame. So little trivia, there's only been 2 defensive tackles in the history of UT football that I know of that have ever led the team in tackles in a season. It's Steve McMichael, did it in 1979, and you guys know who the other guy is?
Casey Hampton.
Casey Hampton. That's exactly right. So imagine the level of impact you have on a football game to lead your team in tackles playing defensive tackle. Steve McMichael was an amazing player and a really interesting guy too. So it's a great honor here for him. And then also globally, quite literally globally, Longhorns right now have 12 medals.
Amazing.
That would place us, the University of Texas is the 12th highest country in the world based on that. And the one that I saw that was amazing was Ryan Krauser, shot putter, got his 3rd Olympic gold medal. 6'7", 320, sweet feet, very coordinated. I love that he pursued his dream. He's got 3 gold medals. He's an Olympian. But dude, Ryan, if you played offensive tackle for Texas, I think you could have added a couple of zeros to your net worth. But nonetheless, hat tip to all the Longhorn Olympians.
An Olympian of our hearts is our friend Laura Baker. It's a great transition. I'm really proud of that one. So if you're looking to buy or sell your home in the Central Texas area, let's reach out to Laura Baker. That's what our friend Ian Boyd did. Laura is a UT grad, an avid Longhorn fan, and she's a member of IT. So she's part of the family. She's also an elite member of the Andy Allen team with Keller Williams Realty. So again, if you're looking to move, buy, or sell your house in the Central Texas area, that's 512-784-0505. That number is 512-784-0505. Eric, we have a question about the freshmen, specifically in the secondary. So I'm wondering, let me bring this up for us. Let me just scroll down here. So syntax, I think I know what they're saying here, but what of the freshman safeties and how are they? How'd I do?
Yeah. He added about after that. What about any freshman safeties? How are they? Yeah, they brought in 2 guys, very, very different prospects, Xavier Filsaime and Jordan Johnson-Robel. I think it's going to be like a freaks and geeks pairing eventually. Not that Xavier is going to have all that much trouble processing, learning the position, but I think JJR just has really, really good instincts and mind for the game, mind for the position. I think he's going to be a really good field general and tackler. He's probably going to play special teams this season. I was surprised at how big Filsaime was when I saw him last week. He looked all at 200 pounds, really good build. He's going to carry 205, eventually 210, and that's wheelhouse for him, not getting too big, but also keeping his speed. The defensive back we're hearing the most about of the freshman is easily Kobe Black. I guess you talked about him playing first team today is just, getting some experience, but he's earning those reps, that increased playing time. And of course they want to see what he can do and test him a little bit more. But, I had a source tell me the other day, and we wrote it on Inside Texas, that they could see him playing this year if they needed him. Now, of course, Jahdae Barron playing there might take a few snaps from him, but he does have the ability, at least per early August practice, to play for Texas this season. So right now, Kobe Black is probably the furthest ahead and the most ready to play this season. I'm not sure how much they'll need him, but he's there if the injury situation calls for it. But we could see JJR on special teams this season. He's one of 4 true freshmen that I heard that we'd see on special teams. Him, Anthony Smith, and both the running backs are most likely, at least at this point.
Hey, Eric, Steve Sarkisian actually mentioned that in the presser today. He mentioned Jordan Johnson-Robel by name and said exactly that. So maybe that's what you're referencing, or maybe you
No.
He's confirming publicly what your insiders told you.
Those are usually him confirm. I love those things. If you read Inside Texas closely, like last week I said Anthony Smith is up 20 pounds. Somebody asked me who's gained a lot of weight since I got there. The very next day, Sark goes, "Oh, Anthony Smith's up 20 pounds." I go, "Thank you, boss." Sometimes he's ahead of us. Sometimes we're ahead of him, not in understanding it and knowing it, but him disclosing it publicly.
It is a good feeling. Like when I was writing my preview, I was like, I had this whole paragraph and a half speculation about moving Jahdae Barron out to corner, Gilbo playing nickel. And I'm like, did I just waste a bunch of ink like on nonsense speculation? I'm like writing fan fiction of what I want to happen.
Yeah.
And then I heard Ian's report, and I was like, yes.
Yeah, we were all we were all excited about that one. It's just if they can pull that off, it raises the ceiling for that room for sure.
A question from our friend Santiago, who's already brought in one question today about the Heisman, but this is more to do with the draft. So again, he fully appreciates that this is probably a little bit early in the game, but he's asking numbers here. I'm going to add on to this question a little bit and ask for names as well. So as Ian searches the ceiling for potential answers, I'll go to Paul first. First of all, how many? Let's go with that.
Let's each go around and start. We'll just say a name.
Okay.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say Kelvin Banks gets drafted.
That was mine. Okay. All right. Hold on.
If any of you guys want to debate me on that, I'm cool with it. I think I'll win.
That's fine. It's fair.
The NFL really devalues this position, but I'll go with quarterback. They just don't, they're very selective, highly meticulous.
Arch Manning's not going pro next.
Very thorough evaluations. So I'll go with Quinn.
Okay.
So we got
I've got first rounder all around Michael Taft. I think no question there. We can just move on. Ian, you had something? Maybe you're in a delay there, Ian. I said
no. I actually confused Jermaine Lole for Sydir Mitchell today, partly because he's wearing 99, which was Mitchell's number until recently, but also partly because Lole is extremely wide and large. Yeah. I think that Texas has a really high number of guys that could end up in the late rounds. If they win 11 games and have some playoff showcase games, I think they could end up with like 10 guys drafted with loads of late round picks from the ranks of like Lole, maybe Broughton, certainly Alfred Collins, probably 2 or 3 offensive linemen, 2 or 3 wide receivers.
Makuba.
Maybe even Makuba, maybe even Gunnar Helm in like the 6th or 7th round. So
Bond.
Yeah, we'll see.
I did not.
Bond going in the first round. Now he's going to have to start catching the ball more consistently, but a lot of people have Bond as a first rounder right now.
So we have lost 11 last year, and people were like, "That's amazing, great number. We're freaking out." We could match that again in 2025 if things break the right way.
Yeah, no doubt.
Let's play a fun game of comps here. This is a fun one. Could Filsaime be more like Aaron Griffin and Rubel more like Aaron Williams?
Mike Griffin.
Oh, say Mike. Yes, thank you.
I'll handle that if you want.
Please.
I'll be Mr. Negativity. No, on both.
God. Okay.
Filsaime is
Huff.
Yes, that's right. And then Rubel is more almost like Quandre Diggs like. Probably without that level. He doesn't have that level of athleticism. But
I would say
Aaron Williams was a like prototype corner nickel, 6 feet, 200 pounds, chiseled. That's not Rubel. That's not his type.
Jordan Johnson Rubel. I'll go Chris Brown on him, and Chris Brown played some good football games for Texas. So Filsaime is Huff, JJR, Chris Brown.
Do you remember that guy for Baylor, Henry Black, who started on their Big 12 title team? He is very similar to Rubel physically. Ian's kids agree.
Yeah, I can just going through these super chats here. Just the one about Jonte, and I think we covered that. Okay. Really nice work, guys. All right. So moving forward, we have how many more? Are we done with open practices to the media, Ian? Or are you going to get a chance to redeem yourself, or have we lost that opportunity until next year?
I believe there's going to be one tomorrow afternoon that Joe just was texting us about. I don't know about if I'll redeem myself or not, or if I'll be watching the baby. But it sounds like there'll be a couple more. Ideally, they would have one of those big open to the public practices where you can sit in the bleachers. They actually show more in those because they'll like scrimmage for the fans. So you could actually learn more from that than some of these media availabilities, believe it or not.
I feel like Ian believes that Cleve Bryant is still at UT, and that if he's taking notes, they're going to come and like grab him and escort him off, which I've seen happen at an open practice for Texas before. So I think this staff's probably a little more laid back in that regard. And Ian, if you need a resource to identify players, I have one. It's got pictures in it. There, yeah, so does LC. Exactly.
Trying to see what I got here.
I'm
No, it's not that.
some Norwegian. Okay.
Eric has my preview, and it's got all sorts of notes written on it, like wrong, all caps.
You thought I was about to break out Family Circus.
Well, I don't know if this is the show for that. All right, Eric, last question. And this is unless somebody comes up with something. One of the things that you have been talking about is the idea of where Texas is going to be with their run fits. I know it's early days, and I think appropriate time to get more of a sample size is obviously going to be the scrimmage. But are you hearing anything positive in that regard moving forward?
Yeah. Hearing the defensive linemen are playing with a lot of experience. When you bring in 3 guys that are seniors on top of having 2 seniors coming back, there's no excuses for maturity. But then I also think Johnny Nansen does a really good job of coaching up that aspect of the defense. He's played sort of a central role in that. And then you've got a high IQ secondary, and you got Anthony Hill at linebacker, who's a guided missile, natural football player. Not just, what makes him such a freak is not just that he's very good athletically for the position and physically disposed for it. It's that he's also very smart. You got David Bennett and Maurice Blackwell, 2 more seniors. So if you cannot fit the run with this much experience on the defense, you've got a serious problem. We can only assume that they'll be better, but we'll be listening for more anecdotes coming from Saturday scrimmage for sure. But I feel good about it. I'm not as worried about that. The internet's been trying to get me worried about D tackles and all that. I'm just not buying it with this this amount of experience, maturity. They got size, physicality. It's all there. I'm not saying they're going to be great, but I don't think it's going to be some detrimental, kneecapping thing for the defense this year.
Hey, one thing to mention, Sark mentioned in the presser today, asked about Trey Morgan, and I mean Trey Moore's starting. He's not going to be a situational player, which is great news. And he sounds like a guy they don't want to come off the field unless they want him to come off the field, like to rest him. So sounds like he's starting at one edge, and then when we go base, sounds like he's starting at Sam. So,
Did he say that? Did he say that today?
No, he didn't say exactly those words, but he basically was asked about Trey Moore and just said,
"Yeah, well, I wrote that. Yeah, I wrote it the other day that he's the Buck and he's the Sam. He's not coming off the field. They'll rotate him, of course. They've got to play some of those other guys, but yeah, he's the main dude at both Sam and Buck.
But I think he's bringing an element of pass rush that we have not seen. Just pure quickness, speed. He's got a diversity of moves. He's got bend. He's just a relentless guy. And these, something Ian and I got to pat our backs on this is we realized early when the portal really hit that there was going to be the immediate fan reaction of let's go get these failed 5 stars at Georgia and Bama that are third string after 4 years. Well, there's a reason. Who's going to level up are going to be these group of 5 guys who are all conference, all league, defensive player of the year. Those guys actually scale up really well. And that's been the case the last 2 or 3 years. Those group of 5 guys who are stars, they're stars at the next level, or at least very good players. And it's often the 5-star, the troubled guy that's been to 4 schools in 3 years. That guy typically doesn't pan no matter what the star rankings are. So it's just an interesting thought.
We've had a couple questions specifically about the running game. So I think what I'll do is I'll take it from this angle, which is CJ or Blue, who ends up with RB1. Now, I'm not of the mind that, frankly, it really matters who RB1 is. But what are your thoughts on that? We'll start with you, Paul.
Outside of Christian McCaffrey, the RB1 is
right.
Basically an extinct idea. And that's odd because we all grew up with Earl Campbell and Ricky Williams and Jamal Charles, all getting 25, 28, 30 carries a game. We'll do that in individual games with a hot hand, but I think it's 1A and 1B, and it's matchups. It's what we want to do. Will CJ end up with more carries maybe at the end of the season? Seems reasonable, but might Blue have just as many yards on fewer carries, or might he get more receptions? Yeah, that's also reasonable. So I just don't think there's a clear distinction here. And if you read the tea leaves of what the coaches are saying, they really, really like Trey Wiseman.
Yeah.
So he's a guy that they're going to get out on the field and play. I don't think we're going to see a Christian Clark or one of these freshmen break through and get a bunch of snaps this year. I think they're going to be put on ice.
Anything anybody want to contradict Paul just for some drama? We can treat it like a Bravo show. No,
everything he said, but in the inverse.
Okay.
No, he's exactly right. They're going to play to each strength, but I also think that Jaden Blue is going to be a better inside runner than a lot of people think. They think just because he's fast, he's going to be an outside guy. I think he's got slashing ability between the tackles. I think he's got more higher upside than CJ Baxter does this year. I'm really bullish on Blue based on the maturity he's shown since he got to campus. The acceleration he showed, a lot of the speed. I mean, he's one of the fastest players in all of college football. But they need them both, like Paul said. So fans shouldn't get hung up on that. I just think Blue has a little bit more upside and is a little bit more dangerous, and is going to keep defensive coordinators up at night a little bit more than Baxter. But they're going to need them both.
On the play that I filmed, Blue made a pretty intense cut back on outside zone. Downhill through the wash. It would have been a pretty small gain, but he was going to fall forward, and how far back he went to get it and how quickly he did it was pretty impressive.
He creates a lot of downhill velocity, and I'm not a physics major, but I know that makes up for some of the lack of bulk they're bigger backs than him, but he runs with some pop, and he shows a little bit more want to every year. This is his opportunity. His goal is to leave after this season. And to do that, he's going to have to run it between the tackles and show that versatility with his hands as well. So I'm expecting a big year, man. I would not be surprised if either one of them goes for 1,000 yards. Probably only be one of them, but it could be Baxter or Blue. So I don't know. Curious to see how it plays out myself.
We got a super chat from our friend Football Junkie. And for $4.99, he's asking the question, third down NASCAR package. All right, guys, what is your third down NASCAR package? Go ahead and give me your lineup. All right, Ian, you're looking straight down the barrel of the camera, so I'm gonna take this to you first.
I think it would have more, obviously, probably Simmons or Vosick, Burke inside, and Collins. I would still keep Collins out there, I think, but they haven't really used that very much thus far under PK. You got to be able to sub it in and sub it back out to use it. It's not quite as easy as like in the NFL, where you can package your defense differently. Teams will go really fast in college and they'll catch you in that package, and then you're in bad shape. So it's not quite as common.
Paul,
can you want Burke for sure, right?
For clarification, you're asking for a defensive lineup. Tell us in the chat.
Well, go through really quickly, just so the folks at home. What brief explanation? NASCAR package. I'll give this to you, Paul.
I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, it's a pass rushing third down defense, defensive front.
Okay,
which is why you would want Burke on there, because he'd be on there naturally under any circumstance playing Jack, but he gives you a better pass rushing element than Barron Sorrell had, or Barron Sorrell offers. So. And then you've got Trey Moore, who's not coming off the field either. You probably want to get Colin Simmons on there somehow. He's kind of easy to sub on, especially if they're already in base defense. So if you can get those three on, you've already got sort of a modified pass rush, and then you'd want Alfred Collins as nose tackle.
Yeah, and then you definitely want Hill out there, and I don't want him dropping in coverage on that. I want him picking a gap or lining up on the edge and overloading one edge. Lining him up next to Trey Moore or Colin Simmons is fun. And heck, let's get crazy and play 6 defensive backs behind it.
No, totally.
From something Sark told me today in the press conference, I think using Hill in ways like that is going to be much more the identity of the team this year. They're just gonna move him around and turn him loose a lot.
We've been talking a little, staying on the defensive side of the ball. We've been talking about Trey Moore quite a bit. So David Keith Williams, thanks for writing in, David, has a question concerning his weight. Now, there's a 10-pound differential here, but David Keith Williams is saying at 245, he thinks it's going to be tough for Trey to set the edge and would prefer him to be closer to 255. What say you, Paul?
Well, you could set the edge with technique and power, and you could set the edge with technique and quickness. If someone's trying to run outside zone on you, you actually don't set the edge by shocking the tackle and holding them in place. You actually do it by feathering with them and stringing it out. You have to have that mobility. So, look, there's trade-offs for every position. We could start Alfred Collins on the edge. We'd set the edge against a power run really, really well, but we'd give up a lot of other stuff. So there is, outside of Lawrence Taylor, outside of Reggie White, every player has trade-offs. And that includes, the JJ Watts of the world and even spectacular players like that. So yeah, Trey Moore is not one of the stronger guys, but he's got great quickness. He's got really good technique, and actually guys who can get low and who can play with the proper technique. One of the best edge setters I've ever seen at the University of Texas was Joseph Osai, and he did it at 245 pounds. So you don't have to weigh 290 necessarily. Would we love it if he was 255 and he wasn't a step slower? Yeah, that would be awesome. But he's still in his physical journey. The thing that I think is encouraging about Trey Moore is that he actually is 245. I was a little concerned when I watched him at UTSA that he might actually be 230 or 225, but he's not. So that's good news in that regard.
Anything to be contrarian about there, Ian? That sounded like a really good answer to me.
No, not really. I think they've been just fine with guys of that size. They taught Ogofu how to do it at like 6'1", 238 or something. Michigan won the national championship with a 6'1", 236-pound edge in that spot. He'll be back this year. Josiah Stewart. That doesn't really.
He hasn't been a liability in practice going up against good offensive tackles. So that's guys that we know are good.
We want to thank you all for checking in with us today. We've got a lot of coverage. We are finally back to proper football. So please check in with us. We're going to have our practice reports throughout the week. So please like and subscribe. The easiest way to know when we've posted is to hit that bell. So please hit that bell, like and subscribe. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscriptions by the time the season rolls around. I think that's, you may get some naming rights for maybe one of the kids. It's hard to say. But I'm pretty sure you get to name one of the staff members' children.